Uh, Andy,
Yeah.
I totally forgot to adjust that thing on my desk. Can you use your powers to do it? No, you idiot! Don't use your powers. But like, can you use your powers to do that for me, please?
Dad never talked to me like this.
Look, I just want the best for us.
Whatever. You never give me anything that I want. I want Choco Crisps.
Just come on, just use your powers a little bit, and I'll give you a Choco Crisp.
All right.
You fucking idiot! All right, now we're just gonna start this podcast.
Fine.
There you go. There's our skit. Welcome to No Clip. I'm Chad Ruthermond,
I'm Andy Kinnick.
and today we are joined by special guests Daniel Otten
Hello.
and Janelle Vickers.
Hey guys!
And today we're going to be talking about Life is Strange 2, which was released, and this is hard to believe for me because it took so long for the whole thing to come out, but in September of 2018, and was published and developed by Dontnod Entertainment and Feral Interactive.
Yeah.
And
Published by
Enix
Square
as well,
Enix, yeah.
This game has been kind of sort of out for a while. But the last episode just released at the very end of last year. So we have now played it and are going to be talking about it. If you are unfamiliar with the Life is Strange franchise, it is like a Telltale-style adventure game series in which you make dialogue decisions to drive the plot,
Branching narrative, etc., etc.
etc. And I gotta say, over like we talked about Life is Strange. It's one of our earliest episodes that we did, and
Everyday Zero.
over. Yes,
Dan with that no clip trivia.
he does have it.
No Clip superfan /
The
guest.
historian,
He's the only one.
Dan, the
He
historian.
proofread our podcast.
He liked it.
He liked it.
But I think over the years, like I feel like the Don't Nod formula for these adventure games has really resonated a lot more with me than Telltale's version, and I don't really know what it is about that makes it true, like about these games in specific, but they do, and I was therefore looking forward pretty heavily to this game as it was releasing, knowing that I wouldn't have the patience or constitution or wherewithal not to like die inside waiting for each episode to come out. And so the hype built up inside of me, and then ultimately I didn't love this game.
There. It died there. Like a flower, deprived
like
of nutrients.
So what did you guys think?
Well, I mean, we came off pretty high on the original Life is Strange. Like,
Yeah.
we enjoyed playing it as a group. We enjoyed kind of discussing the branching endings. And, I mean, I think based on my limited time being on the podcast, I've talked quite a lot about how, for me, video games function as a form of escapism, where you want to imagine yourself in this situation, or, you know, it's an RPG. What would you do in this situation? How would making this change have affected something else? And so I think that's why I was very much let down by Life is Strange 2, because it was an environment and a story and a situation that I did not want to be in. And it's really hard to want to play a game, at least for me personally, where I had such a visceral hatred and distaste for putting myself into that environment. So overall, I would say it was not necessarily as much of an enjoyable, engrossing experience as the first.
Yeah, our journey of playing this game was like, we played the first episode, and then Janelle was like, that bummed me out so hard that we took like a 3-week break. And then I was like, we either have to play this game or tell them we aren't gonna do the podcast. And so we would schedule like, all right, we're gonna play one episode now, and then afterward we'll like reward ourselves with like a Miyazaki movie or something fun. Which is probably coming off like I didn't hate this game, and obviously we're gonna get into all the details of it, but like I really did admire Life is Strange 1 a lot. I think it's a really fun game and a very cool like artistic experience. And so like I admire the creators of that game and like wanted to like this game a lot. And it's obvious that a lot of care and effort went into it. And in a lot of ways it's not like there are a lot of qualities about it that are good. It's a very beautiful game visually. So like I don't want to just like trash it. But if this wasn't like the bottom line is like I didn't look forward to playing this and like episode to episode, and it was like kind of a chore to get through.
It kind of seems like we all had a similar experience.
Yeah, well, I want to respond to that to some degree, not to discredit your point, because it is extremely valid, and I feel like probably what a lot of people went through going through this game. I do want to give Andy a chance to say something first, but
I don't care what Andy.
Yeah, I think we should just move on.
Yeah,
it's running long already. We have final thoughts.
But I had a similar experience, and like Chad brought up, waiting for it, I think inflated the hype a little bit. Like, Life is Strange 1 is just a game you told me about, and we played, or you watched me play because you'd already played it. And it ended up like skyrocketing to one of my favorite games. Like, it was just such a surprise. And I think one thing that game does to like segue into a larger conversation is I think the pacing, because you brought up you like Life is Strange 1 more than the Telltale style.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that it is more laid back, like gives you time, as much time as you want to answer or make the decisions, and you're able to rewind and see what they all do. That pacing, it lets you like live Max's life, spend a lot of time like in her dorm room and getting to know her. And I think that's what people really connect with Life is Strange. And this game doesn't deliver that as much. It's a lot brisker of a pace.
Yeah. I want to... Okay, so you are correct. That is a good segue into some stuff. Mm-hmm. But I do want to jump to the tone thing that Dan was bringing up earlier. Specifically, I get the fact that the first episode of this is like an extreme bummer, and then it proceeds to hit you with extreme bummer after bummer for the remainder of its runtime. But I will say that like I think it is good, and even like one of this game's unique strengths, not just in the franchise but in like gaming as a whole, that it tackles sort of like these very uncomfortable subjects with varying degrees of success, but some of them like it hits and you really do like it makes you feel shitty. And like obviously you guys know me and the fact that I like that sometimes.
Okay, Daniel can tell you that going into this, I said I think Chad and I are going to have similar opinions, but yet still be on opposite ends of the spectrum, because our media consumption
she did say this
is complete opposite poles as far as like the satisfaction one can get from dark / disturbing / depressing / distressing content. Because for me, I'm like, hey, this fucking sucks. I never want to be near it again. And you're like, let's ponder the deeper themes. And I'm like, fuck out of here, dude.
I mean, I would describe Chad's favorite genre of movies as ones that make you question whether the experience of living isn't worse after all than just being dead. Like movies that subject you to experiences that are so horrible or unimaginable that you just think maybe it's better to just plunge into the void.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who went through, like, not only high school English classes, but then went on and got more advanced degrees, I had to read a lot of books that I kind of felt similarly about, where I would get through the book and I would say, that message was really important. I understand why I had to read this book in a class where they're teaching us about these themes and sort of, like, issues in literature and in society. Also, I never want to read it again. Like, I'm trying to remember this one book that I read. Oh, Christ, I can't even remember the name. But it was like this experience about basically this wonderful, innocent young peasant girl who gets, like, taken advantage of and sexually assaulted. And basically the entire novel is her fall from grace. And it's like, okay, I get that. Got it? It's terrible being a woman, issues of class and economic structure and society, blah, blah, blah. And with this, I feel like, similarly, the message is extremely important. It's dealing with issues of racism and police brutality and classism and family. But I got to the end of it and was like, yes, I'm really glad they made this. The message is really important. I could stand behind it. I hated experiencing the entire thing.
That's actually not as distant as you thought from the things that I feel about this as well. It's one of those things where it feels like it should be there, and it does exist, but, like, my taste skews more toward the unearthly and disturbing, as opposed to the sad. Like, this game is capital S, fuck it, capital A, capital D, sad, and
with three
and with the
A's.
second D, Students Against Drunk Driving.
Yeah.
And it doesn't let up, like, at all. Like, there are very few moments of levity. I didn't need that paper anyway. But there are very few moments of levity in the game, and the ones that are there end up feeling kind of out of place, because you're like, you haven't really earned your happiness, not because of anything you've done, but because the situation you're in just doesn't call for it.
Yeah, no, it went from 0 to 60 real quick, and then you just level at 60 for 5 episodes.
Well, one thing when we finished episode 2, that I don't want to get, like, far afield from Andy's point, but, like, Janelle mentioned, well, like, I'm having an easier time processing this because, like, it's not quite as bleak. And, like, I think the dog...
Oh, no, it was the end of episode 1.
Yeah.
Oh.
I
It
was
was like the dog was, like,
no.
a great, like, you know, lifted the tone a little bit.
Right, well, because I said, like, normally, if, like, a dog is introduced and it's a cute little puppy for a kid, I'd be like, this is cheap and stupid, and they're playing with my emotions, and I hate it. And I'm, at the end of this, was like, oh, thank God, they played with my emotions.
Right.
They gave me a puppy. And then about 10 minutes into chapter 2, it's like, oh, Mushroom? She dead.
Yeah.
Goddamn!
And then, she got killed, and I was like, this is cheap and stupid, and they're playing with my emotions, and I hate it.
Right.
Like, let's introduce this dog just so we can kill it to get a cheap, like... I hated that, and thought, like, it was a totally unearned moment of sadness. I don't know if you guys had strong feelings about it.
Yeah, that's a good point that I hadn't really thought about until just now. Is, like, it really does... This is really emotionally draining. It does kind of feel like someone's just following Sean around, beating him with a stick the whole entire time that the game's go on. He cannot catch a break. But I agree specifically with the whole mushroom thing. Like, she's introduced at the very end of the first episode and then killed almost immediately at the beginning of the second episode. It's like 15 minutes in. And I think it goes back to what I said earlier, is like the pacing of this. I think it's a bit too fast. Like, you don't get to connect with stuff before it moves on.
Well, yeah, and I don't even know if it's necessarily that it's too fast, but it's that each chapter ended up being a vignette from a different point of their journey, such that there were very few through characters. Like, it says something that the deceased father, Esteban, who dies at the end of chapter 1, is one of the few characters that is consistent throughout the story. And depending on how you play the game and what choices you make, there really may only be the boys and Karen. Because if Cassidy ends up dying, which is a possibility in chapter 3, you don't hear from her.
And if you don't call Lila, then
she's out.
She's out of the picture.
So it ended up being that there were these episodes that didn't carry the emotional weight from chapter to chapter because of these developing relationships and characters. And so I think that's why they ended up creating these more dramatic, high-tension scenes. Whereas, and I, again, hate to compare this second episode, or second series, to the original game, but part of the reason why Life is Strange was so impactful is because you had these characters that kind of you had a relationship with, and you saw their relationships form with each other. And so, while there were still moments of tension, there was enough breathability for the characters to kind of be such that they felt more earned and you felt you had more of a connection with them. But, like, just for example, the characters in Chapter 4, in a way, like, we didn't know these people. So when they're like, okay, say goodbye to everyone before you leave town.
The last episode.
Oh, yeah, and 4 and 5, yeah.
Yeah, I was, like, really grumpy about that, because, like, alright, say goodbye to these characters they just introduced, like, 2 seconds ago, and, like, I'm supposed to care that he's saying goodbye to, like, Stanley and what's his name? Or
Arthur.
And Joanne, or Joan, or Joanne. Like, I know nothing about them. Like, they seem like nice people, but, like, I spent 0 time with them. The character they're telling me is sad to be leaving them, but I don't care at all because I haven't spent any time with them.
Are you talking about the trailer park?
Yeah.
Like hippie commune place? Okay.
Yeah.
It's been a while. I forget a
jumping
lot of
way
the
ahead.
characters' names.
But I think it's important to talk about as a whole. There is very much like a show don't tell issue.
Yes,
I think,
for sure.
where they keep telling you Daniel is sad to be leaving, Sean is upset because Daniel is upset, but we as the player don't feel that. You're very much relying on being told that they're brothers and that kind of family bond is supposed to be enough for you to empathize with the situation, where I feel like the characters, again, in the first game, had that time to develop, and you get to know Victoria, and, oh god, what was the girl's name, who, in maybe episode 3, you have to save from committing suicide?
Jane.
Is it Jane?
No.
No,
Something Marsh.
hold on. Kate.
Kate. But that was so impactful because this is a character that you've known from the beginning, and that felt like real stakes of not wanting to lose this character that you've seen kind of struggle and flourish, and Max had these moments with, and you can empathize because it's a relatable situation, and you're in high school, and you remember what that feels like. Whereas again,
look at the situation that the Kate thing puts you in. It's a situation where your powers don't work, so now you have to operate under like real human being stakes, and the thing that it hits you with is, what do you know about this character? You've spent 3 episodes with this person up until now. What can you remember? How well did you get to know them? Whereas when you're faced with a similar situation in this game with the church lady, and like she's got Daniel held captive and everything, it's like, what can you tell Daniel about her that's going to convince him to your side? It's like, I don't fucking know. All I did was read her receipts and shit. Like, right. It's not even, like, it's not comparable. Like, it's not personal at all. Yeah, they set it up in the same way, but the situation, like, the amount of time that you have, like, I don't even remember her name. Me neither. And we took a minute to come up with Kate's name, but we
only remember it because it's so weird.
Yeah, it's a little strange. It's such a like cult leader name, Elizabeth.
But like, we took a second to remember Kate's name, but we played that game 4 years ago. Like, it's been a long fucking time.
But I can tell you exactly, like exactly what she looks like, and I could tell you like details about her family. You know, that she has younger brothers, and like you had to learn her favorite Bible verse, and like understand how to relate with her on a human level. And that also brings into question like the 2 other, I feel like, overarching issues about the mechanics of the gameplay, which is one, that you are not in control of the power in this game. And then number 2, wait, I had another point. That's what you're saying. The power and
the
That's
glory.
all right, Chad.
forever.
Can you just edit in another good point here?
Well, no,
Yeah,
I had it. I had it. It was based on what you said. That the power didn't feel like it was fueling the plot. It felt like they laid out the plot and then put the power in. You know?
Yeah, it's like
so
they
much
needed
of
something.
Daniel using his power was like, ooh, let me float these objects to you, Sean. And I'm like, fuck off, dude. Stand up and walk the 5 feet. You're just being an asshole. Whereas with Max, it felt like she's really kind of tapping into something, and it was like an integral part of how you interacted with the world.
Well, yeah, it was like a mechanical manifestation of her indecisiveness. Like, she was very... she didn't like making decisions, and the power let her deal with that in like a supernatural, like superpower way. And this game doesn't really have that with the levitation powers and all that.
Yes. I like, in addition to it not feeling like it aids in the game really in any way, the other thing is like, I feel like, and I think that I've gotten across over the course of what, like 70, 80 some episodes of this show, that I am not typically this cynical, but I genuinely feel like the elevator pitch for Life is Strange Season 2 was like, what if we had a character like tear down the border wall with psychic powers? Like, they had that and then worked backward from
that sounds
there.
about right.
Yeah, like, but...
And I like that conceptually seems like it could be a great climax.
It does seem like an X-Men comic splash page.
Yeah. But like something about this game just, and not that it doesn't feel genuine or like they don't care or something, like they're just doing it for shock value. I genuinely just think that like they didn't have, it doesn't have the same cohesiveness that the first season does.
Yeah, I think there are two things we've been talking about, how we felt like the game kind of shows or tells you and doesn't show you. As Daniel said, like, it tells you Daniel's sad to be leaving after he just met these people, and the fact that you aren't in control of the power. Like, I think they're trying to go for like a theme of like a parental thing. Like, the game's not about like you like getting to like experience this stuff. It's like you keeping Daniel safe and making sure his experiences with these things are the, like, good,
net positive.
Yeah, like it's loose, but I think they're trying to do something with that, but it feels like disconnected.
Well, I
so
think
you're saying that we're all so self-centered that we couldn't see a plot that was
well,
focused on
no,
somebody else.
I don't think it like you said, I don't think it clicks. I don't think it's quite cohesive with like the whole package.
I think you're absolutely right about that, especially, and it's illustrated by the fact that so much of what, unlike Life is Strange 1, so much of what happens at the end is sort of more amorphously based on like your parenting of Daniel. Like, the outcome you get is determined in part by like, did you encourage him to use his power or not? Like, did you
let him cuss?
Did you like try to teach him to help people, or did you try to teach him to like put himself first? And so like that, I actually think that theme is fairly well executed. Like, at least mechanically, it's kind of interesting that like this big final decision is the culmination of like lots of little decisions you've made, which is like pretty reflective, a pretty realistic way to reflect like how trying to like raise a young kid might like result in like affecting big choices they make.
Right.
My biggest issue with the mechanic is that like it's just not fun to play. Like in Life is Strange 1, it's like this wish fulfillment of like, what if you could rewind time and like try every avenue to see which one, like, the outcome you like best. Like, that's a super interesting idea and something that in one form or another I think anybody has thought about, and it leads to a lot more engagement. I mean, like, you're using the mechanic in every scene in Life is Strange 1, and the way we played it anyway, like, you try out all the dialogue options and then like rewind and pick the one you like the outcome the best. Like,
you can.
And it also helped with what I think is a really common RPG issue, which is where the dialogue option is labeled with like a very simplistic one sentence thing that you choose. And there were times during this where we looked and we're like, these are 3 bad options. Like, I don't want to tell my mom that sucks, or I blame you. And then like you choose it and it like turned out fine. You're like, oh, thank God. But you know, it's the same thing with the original Life is Strange. You might pick an option and be like, oh, that was balls. Never mind. Let me try the other way. Whereas with this, it felt like, and sometimes if you don't make a decision quickly enough, they assume that you're a sulky teenager, and things end up even worse. So like, I just thought that was a really interesting way to integrate the power into the game, and also you would get the value of replaying and trying all the different options without having to go back and replay the entire game again.
Yeah, and a touch that I really like is that you can use it outside of the dialogue. Like, you can use it literally whenever to just rewind stuff. Make Alyssa get hit in the head with a football like 10 times in a row.
Watching Alyssa get beamed is great on the 5th time or the 50th time. We get none of that. Yeah,
there's more like moment-to-moment engagement because you control the power.
Yeah. I want to sort of like, in order to try and connect this to the game at hand for once,
can we just redo Life is Strange 1? Just like return to that episode? Yeah.
But I remember JJ called it medium Telltale quality, and I will never forgive him for saying that.
I mean, there are a couple of Telltale games that are outstanding, but
the
vast majority definitely do not meet the bar that Life is Strange sets.
Yeah, I didn't know how to respond to that comment when he said it originally, but I also totally disagree.
I think I probably just went, uh-huh.
Yeah.
And that's why we killed him, and he's no longer on the podcast.
Well, and now that he's not here to defend himself, I think we can all agree that Warren sucks. So
fuck Warren.
Well, we all hated Warren.
Yeah.
JJ defended him.
But to track it forward, if we compare this game to Before the Storm and to Captain Spirit, which came out between the two and both like did away with the ability, the reverse time ability, like it wasn't a thing in those games, I still think that the smaller scale of those games ended up making them feel better to play overall. I think Captain Spirit has its problems, but this isn't the Captain Spirit podcast. But I genuinely enjoyed Before the Storm, Beyond Thunderdome.
Mad Max,
the Storm,
Beyond Thunderdome.
Beyond Thunderdome.
I genuinely thought that was a good game. Like, I enjoyed that, and that one got pretty negative reception overall.
Yeah, I think it's...
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think it's the like things we've been talking about, like the fact that it's like a very personal human story, like you're spending time with these two characters and their lives. That's a large part of the appeal of the first one, and Before the Storm really tries to capture that, and they do to mixed success. Not as strong as the first one, but they do manage to hit the feeling, I think.
Yeah, I think that Andy's point is actually so good that it's inspired me to make a different point than the one I was going to make. I totally agree with that, and I think that's like, if I had to distill one thing about Life is Strange 1 that I really liked that was absent from this game, and really like the core reason that just didn't click with me, is
it's Victoria.
It's what?
It's Victoria.
It's Victoria. She's great. Now, it's that both games obviously are like magical realism stories. They're like fantastic in a literal sense and could not happen in real life. But Life is Strange 1 sets out to, through that story, tell a narrative that is like very relatable and that captures a feeling that like most people growing up sort of in America have, like the feeling of being in high school and sort of being caught between being treated like a kid and being treated like an adult, and feeling like you have really serious things going on in your life, but having all of the adults around you like continue like carrying on as if everything is normal, and feeling like you can't like get them to understand what you're
no
feeling.
matter how many times you're like, there are two moons
Yes.
in the sky.
But like the first game really captures that feeling well, and I think is the main reason that it was so successful for me. This story arguably is not even trying to do that, which, like, I guess fair enough, but it's just telling the events that happen are so horrible that you can't relate to them, right? Like, I'm sure we will get into this, but like it of course is tackling important themes and, like, to some extent things that do happen to people, but like they are on like an order of magnitude worse than things that happen to like everyday people. That feeling of like, I totally understand what these characters are going through, even though, like, obviously I don't experience magical powers or like time travel in my everyday life. That is lost, and I think it's a big part of why I really connected with one, and in this one I did not.
Yeah, the difference, I think, between the scale of the suffering that the characters in Life is Strange 2 were put through is like such that with Life is Strange 1 there was enough of a human connection that you can still relate even when the science fiction stuff kicks in. In Life is Strange 2, it feels like you disconnect from treating the characters as characters and recognize it more of a video game thing as they get fed into the third or fourth meat grinder that they get put into. Right. It's like at first you're like, oh, this sucks, I'm glad that that's over so that the rest of the game can be about them rebuilding as we really get to learn from them. But then they get kicked while they're down so many times that they aren't really down anymore because they're rolling down a hill into a ravine. Like, it's like by the end of the game it's like, I guess depending on what you choose to do, like Sean doesn't even have both of his eyes, and Daniel gets taken away and is abducted by a cult, and like everyone you gave your life savings to a guy you barely know, and then you're in prison. We did. I did that. Yeah.
No, fuck that guy. I'm not giving him any money.
That was the correct choice. Fuck that guy. But still. But they pull the same shit with the dog, where they're like, oh, here's this cute dog. Oh, we killed him. And they're like, here's this character you don't know, but his sister's really sick, and he really needs that money.
Don't you feel bad?
Chad, you mentioned that Before the Storm was negatively received by some critics. I actually don't know and meant to look up what the critical reception was for this game, and I would be very interested to know what it is if you have some insight into that.
We never do this, but I will check just for the sake of it.
While you're doing that, I think while we're talking about the differences in feel of the games, I think a good way to highlight that is to look how each game starts. Because like the first one drops you in with Max in class. Like, it's just like her, like in the first chapter, it's just like you going around the school and, you know, just kind of learning the ropes of what her life is like before it goes into any kind of substantial story stuff. This game starts out with him coming home from school with his with Lila. Was that her name?
Yeah.
And they're talking about this party they're gonna go to. So in my head, I'm like, okay, we're gonna come home, like do our chores, go to the party and like hang out at the party and, you know, flirt with this girl that he likes and, you know, like play out that night. And then the next day, like something happens, you know, that disrupts his daily life. But instead you do a couple things around the house and then their dad immediately gets killed. You know,
No,
like
it went 0 to 60.
Yeah.
And then it never gave you the chance to breathe. That's kind of what we were talking about, where like the sweet moments felt really unearned because you're like, y'all have been on the run forever. The danger level is at max. Like, I can't spend this time feeling really good about you having a relationship with your grandparents, because the entire time I'm thinking like the entire story that we get to see is them running, and I know there's going to be at least 3 more episodes of running before we're done. So you are just constantly prepared for the next thing that's going to happen to kick them further down the hill.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Andy. There's no slice of life moments really in this that were, totally populated all of one, and Captain Spirit and Before the Storm too. That it's obviously like a deliberate design choice, right? And one that I don't think was very successful. But they really left something behind in choosing not to have those moments.
Yeah, I think. For those curious, I did look up the scores for the games, and it's pretty varied. But looking at Metacritic, which isn't a perfect solution, but will do justice for this, Life is Strange 2 ended up being received similarly to Before the Storm, which is a little fairly positive, but not as much as the first one. The scores are 85 for Life is Strange 1, 79 for Life is Strange 2, and 77 for Before the Storm. Okay.
That's interesting. That's basically in line with what I expected, but I wasn't sure, given the the goal of two, of telling, of conveying a certain set of messages, that some people might think that it's more laudable than one for that reason, but I'm not surprised.
That's fair. I mean, Life is Strange 1 tackles some social issues as well, which I think are important, but it doesn't... this is more of a... This is a much more, dare I fucking say it, political game.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, no, games aren't political.
The game isn't shy about it, so...
Yeah.
It is trying to be timely in a way that one was not. It's not it's not partisan politics per se, but it is trying to make it's trying to have a social message that is more timely than I think the first game was, which was not particularly concerned with anything that was in the news.
But I mean, I guess as someone who's studied literature, someone who is a connoisseur of literature, but just it's actually a really common discussion that I have had of form and function, and the ways that messages and themes can be best delivered. You don't want to necessarily put a huge overarching theme with many sub-themes in sonnet, for example. And I just feel that with the expectations that were built from the first game, with the magical realism element and the story that they were telling, I just don't think it meshed as well in the 5-chapter sort of established Life is Strange setup. Again, not that I disagree with the message, or not that I think that it's not important that it was out there, and I think that it's totally fine for video games to be political. No problems from this camp about political video games, but I just don't think it's important to consider how you're presenting the message and how it will be received and consumed. And if I hate consuming it, it's not the best way for you to get your message across. Which I think is sad, because I was rooting for these characters, and I wanted to help them be successful and get them across the border or liberate them. It just, I wasn't able to feel the ways that I wanted to while playing the game and sort of accomplishing those goals.
I do feel like this is actually a conversation that I had not too long ago, and I'm struggling to remember who it was with or what even brought it up in the first place. But there's this idea of being political as a platform, or on a platform rather, in this case in commercial video games, where you have a struggle with, you can present people with issues that you want to address that are fairly easy to take in and think about, and people will generally show up for it. They're there, it's safe, most people aren't going to take a big issue with it, because there are people presenting on both sides, so it doesn't feel like there's a big issue of favoritism or whatever. But the deeper you get, and like the bigger the issue and the darker the subject matter, the harder it is to platform that and still have your platform at the end of it. And so I feel like Life is Strange 2 is trying to tackle, like, I mean, racism is bad, is not an issue
Chad.
that people... I know.
A bold statement
Yeah.
from Chad. A man we can believe in.
It's very brave.
But racism is bad is not a message that a lot of people are going to be opposed to hearing.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that they situate this within, like, this very, like, 2019 political era is what makes it difficult for some people to stomach. And I think that is it, like, that's a detractor. Like Janelle was saying, like, thinking about how you're presenting your message. When you're presenting a universal message in a really specific way, it makes it difficult to, like, maintain a bipartisan audience, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
I doubt there are a lot of Trump supporters who played this game to the end and were like, that's pretty good. Like, I just don't think that it...
Yeah, it's such a direct parallel, I think, is the problem. Like, it's always better to be more, like, to allude to it or be more subtle than to just literally have it end at, like, the border wall, you know?
Yeah.
Well, and we talked about how every character that they encounter who were huge bigots and racists were kind of the ultimate, the worst. Whereas, I don't know, I guess I feel like it's much more interesting and much more common to have people who are more subtly insidiously racist.
Yeah, my biggest problem with like, we've said several times now that, like, it's totally fine that this game, like, had a message that some people might characterize as political. I agree with that, but it was so heavy-handed and explored a side of racism that is almost, as you said, Chad, universally objectionable and kind of uninteresting for that reason, that I don't really give the game a lot of credit for tackling that theme. I mean, I don't imagine that the kind of racism that, like, people of color deal with on a day-to-day basis is, like, the militia member with, like, a flag patch on their jacket who's gonna, like, beat them up or, like, shoot them. It probably is a more, like, unconscious level of racial bias that, like, that kind of theme would probably be more interesting to explore than this. I mean, they just met... So there are, like, two kinds of people in the world of Life is Strange 2. They should have called it Life is Strange, Two Kinds of People. There are cool, off-the-grid hippies and hipsters who are really awesome and fun to be around. And then there are the most bigoted, horrible racists imaginable. Like, that's basically all we see in this game. Like, when they're in a safe place, they're with some cool, off-the-grid hipsters. And then when they are in danger, they're with, like, this cartoon racist who, like, those people do exist in the world, but there are not very many of them, and they are pretty unlucky that they keep running into them. I mean, to me, the most gratuitous are, well, the border militia is a close second, but the most gratuitous in the game, and it did feel manipulative and cheap, like the dog being killed, is when he pulls over to sleep, and, like, two guys from, like, Deliverance knock on his window and are like, oh, this is our property. Also, we're the worst people in the world, and we're gonna, like, literally just attack you. It just didn't feel like an authentic experience. Like, I don't think that that's how people confront racism in their everyday lives.
Yeah, especially when they're kids, you know, like, that made it, like, pushed it even further to, like, feeling unrealistic.
Yeah, and it's not even like... Because, like, obviously these people are in an unusual situation, a strange situation.
Yes, life is pretty strange
Life
like
is
that.
strange. But, yeah, life is not this strange. And the people that they specifically, like, run into, like, that you're calling out, like, those people that you wake up in a field, are not... They are not the problem that's going to do the most good by having the public worry about it. Like, because there are 10 of those people at all. Probably not, but still. Like, it's focusing in weird places. And I feel like, because we should actually talk about this sort of like on like from a game through line perspective. The first episode, I think, actually starts in a really good place. Albeit it is a bit of a gut punch, for sure, but it feels the most, like, distilled that the game gets, because the game is about race, and I think, like, they should have stuck with that pretty much throughout. There's a bit of, like, religious fundamentalism and stuff thrown in later, like, weed culture. It's
Oh,
strange.
Jesus.
Yeah. But, like, the first episode is like the cop is killed in a unusual circumstance, and they're singled out because of their race. And that is what causes them to go on the run.
What I was going to say, and the precipitating event was the fact that 2 kids of color were in a fight with a white kid. Their Mexican father came out, and there was a misunderstanding, again, fueled by the fact that one person was white and one person was not, leading to his death, and then, you know. So, I mean, I think that scene in and of itself is not uncommon, and that's why it worked.
Yeah, agree.
It's because that is the story that you hear about on a day-to-day basis.
And if they had just continued to explore that, I think, going forward, it would have been a more palpable, understandable story than what ended up happening.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it feels like they had like a checklist of conservative stereotypes that they wanted to make sure they like showed we disagree with this, and so it ended up taking it far afield from like the core idea of, or like the core inciting incident.
Right.
Especially the religious, like that whole episode with the church and the cult felt totally gratuitous to us. Something we talked about like offline. And it wasn't really connected to the larger themes, except that like also aren't these people horrible?
Right.
And I just didn't, it seemed out of place.
I will agree that it seems out of place, but I also kind of really liked that episode. But, like, as a standalone...
Yeah,
like,
I feel the same way.
Yeah,
like,
the concept of it is very good.
The episodes are so separated anyway that, like, I don't know, that one ended up probably being my favorite. But, no, I totally agree with your qualms with it. It does feel like a hard left turn to be like, now there's a religious cult.
I mean, by the time they got to the border and he gets shot by the militia, I literally was like, I like rolled my eyes at it. I mean, it's such like a cartoon at that point that like there's this woman like who lives in Texas, but like I don't know what that accent is, just like a generic redneck, who is just like reading. It just feels so ham-fisted that I can't like accept it.
I mean, I don't know. I guess when you're creating this kind of media, it's a lot easier to create sort of ciphers or avatars of, you know, these polar positions. But again, I think it goes back to the fact that you never got, like, a core set of developed characters with kind of more complex mindsets and approaches to things. And maybe it's an issue of the fact that it's sort of spread across the West Coast, so you couldn't really spend that much time in one place with all these same characters. But even then, the characters you do spend a lot of time with, Sean, I don't find particularly compelling. Maybe it was the constant references to weed that I'm like, yes, teenage boys do love weed. Yep, that's at least 45% of his character. And as someone who has really no desire to be a parent themselves, like, having Daniel around didn't do the character any favors, given the kind of arcs and choices that he makes independent of you. Really, the only character that I feel like we kind of got to know and that I really enjoyed being around virtually was Karen. and then everybody else is kind of one-dimensional, or I didn't find myself relating to them. Where again, I hate that I keep going back to the well that is the original Life is Strange game, but I felt like there were so many characters that had complexity and I found either interesting or like genuinely enjoyed. Like, oh god, what was the kid's name who was in the Vortex Club?
Jay.
There were
Jay.
a lot of them.
But the one kid who was just like high all the time.
You want to
like,
vape some
Max.
dank OG bud?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The dank, like, he was a one-dimensional character, but like I enjoyed the time that I spent with him, and I
because
felt
he's
like
also a punchline, you know, like he's not there. You aren't supposed to get really close to that character. He's supposed to be the guy who's like just there to make fun of him for his like bizarre dialogue and shitty, like, I don't know. He felt like a character, a one-dimensional character for a purpose.
yeah, and then because you had these other complex characters that you were devoting so much of your time and attention to. Whereas with this, yeah, it just felt like you kept moving from sort of stereotype to stereotype with nothing that really sort of stuck or moved me in any kind of compelling way.
I mean, Daniel felt like a realistically drawn character for me, but I don't think that inured to the game's benefit that much, because he kind of sucked in the way that like 8-year-old boys suck. And like that was it was fairly realistic, but like this is a problem that is like many forms of media that have a narrative that revolve around a child have, which is like either you accept that this character is important and worth caring about because they're a child, or there like has to be some like for more compelling reason. And I think this game mostly relied on the fact that he was a child. And you just kept being told over and over again, like, how
He's
great
your
Daniel
brother.
is. And, like, yeah,
He's so smart.
He's your brother, and, like, everyone likes him. And, like, it was, again, it's a show don't tell problem, but, like, there was a lot of, like,
he's a brat. Like,
yeah.
You as Sean say all the time, he's a brat, and you're not given a lot of evidence to the contrary.
And Janelle called him the plot shittener ex machina. And that, I think, is basically accurate. Like, anytime the story needed to get worse, Daniel just, like, did some stupid bullshit
or, like, if
to make things worse.
Or if they needed to get out of a situation that Daniel got them into, he would blow a hole in it. And so, like, well, I guess that resolved the issue, but again, you're the one that got us into this situation. And also, I don't know, I guess when I think of a 10-year-old, again, that was, 16 years ago for me being a 10-year-old, but I could not imagine myself acting in the way that Daniel did at times, which then made me resent him. And so by the end, I mean, I don't want to necessarily talk about the endings yet if you guys don't want to, but when I got to the end and we're crossing the border and Daniel's like, I'm out, and he does a dive bomb from the car, I'm like,
we basically
cheered. Sean doesn't have to be a single dad anymore. He gets to sit on the beach in Mexico, and Daniel gets what he wants away from us. Like,
yeah.
And again,
I felt
maybe it's my bias as someone who doesn't want children, but I was very resentful of the fact that I had to take care of this child that I was basically just told, you're this character's brother, deal with him. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't care about him.
No, I felt the exact same way. Daniel was pretty much a complete miss for me. I hated him. He was incredibly selfish and just kept fucking his brother over deeper and deeper and didn't seem to care at all that he'd done it. Like, he causes his brother to lose his eye and does not seem remorseful about it whatsoever. You know, like, I feel like a lot of that's skirted around, and they just kind of make him a stereotypical bratty kid that you have to take care of, and don't have him act like a real human being.
No, I was just gonna say I appreciate Daniel to some extent because his mentality probably most closely matches my own. where I'm just sort of like, why can't I get the thing I want right now? I have to steal this Choker Crisp from this guy's car.
Oh, did you guys steal anything from the store?
Yeah.
We did
but
not.
not until after the whole thing. I think I want to go sort of like episode by episode through this and just like, because the game is about decisions and I want to sort of talk about what you're presented with. But I think that we should do that
after the break.
So let's take that break.
All right.
Welcome back from the break. I wanted to go through the game. I wanted to use the second half to be less about just all of our hot takes and more about the game. Because despite the issues that we obviously have with it, I actually didn't hate this. And I did not dread going back into each episode. But let's go ahead and take it like one at a time and figure out why it is we don't think this worked as well.
Sure.
We already did kind of talk about the first episode and how the instigating sort of like incident of the entire plot actually works pretty well, at least in my opinion. And then it launches into this thing where you go out into the forest and like make camp and sit on a rock and get
And
penalized and draw and get penalized for not helping Daniel down from some somewhat steep ledges.
And maybe he ate some berries and you didn't look closely enough and he
ate
puked.
the bad berries for us because we didn't like press the button fast enough. Or no, what it was is I was playing with the Switch controller and the X and Y buttons are swapped from like it was mapped to an Xbox controller. And so I pressed like, oh yeah, you can eat that.
And I was like, Daniel, why did you do that? No.
I did not mean to. So he had a horrible night of diarrhea as a result.
That's pretty bad.
It serves him right.
Yeah.
Real quick, before we like move on completely from the opening sequence, can I just mention like their father is super cool, and like I don't really have an objection with the way he is characterized. He seems like an authentically cool dude, but like no character has been more obviously doomed than him. Like he's so cool and understanding that you're like, well, like he's gonna die for sure because this game like can't go on with this like totally responsible and loving father being part of the story. I mean, if it was a movie, they would have had him like suspiciously cough for no reason to mark him for death because like he is that clearly a target.
Someone marked his life force for termination. Yeah. He does have that sort of like soon to be dead guy air about him. And like he's also a victim of marketing where like the twist doesn't fully work because if you know anything about the game, including just like the icon on the start screen, you're like, well, they probably wouldn't just leave and go on a cross-country hiking trip if their dad was still at home and fine. Right. So you knew something was gonna happen. Though honestly, I kind of was expecting more of like an apocalyptic cataclysm type event more than anything. Like I thought it was like a society's downfall story when I went in and was surprised to find it to be as personal as it was. But personal, impersonal, depending on how you want to look at it, because there isn't a whole lot of inner character interaction.
But moving on to sitting on a rock and
drawing.
Drawing.
Yeah, I mean, while we're on some things that aren't about going forward in the story, did you guys get a magical floating stick during that scene at all? It looks like no.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, the scene where they're sitting on top of the rock cave thing, and they're talking. There's a stick asset that they had used in like the scene before it. Like I don't remember what he was doing with it. And for whatever reason, we experienced a bug where it was just like floating by his head for that whole scene.
Well, that really probably undercut the dramatic tension.
It sure did.
Yep.
It went on for so long. Like, they changed sequences and, like, moved to different locations, and it was still there, floating above his head. And it was so wild. Like, it wasn't until after the nighttime scene that it went away.
Yeah, it's this game's version of the T-frame guy.
Yeah.
From the first game.
I love that
God,
guy.
I wish that T-frame kid made a
cameo.
Yeah.
I mean, this game had plenty of cameos from Captain
true.
Spirit.
It did have a
in
few.
the first game. Why not T-frame guy? Just like in the back, like just in the woods.
I mean, that's where he exists.
Yep.
In the background.
well, but like
But he had more
half behind a
character than
tree.
a lot of them
Yeah.
in this game.
Hashtag justice for T-frame guy. No, but we did mention you guys mentioned the drawing mechanic, or if you want to call it a mechanic thing that you do.
Ooh,
Biting commentary.
spicy.
But I really liked that. It's one of the things that this game adds that I think fits with the spirit of the original game, the captain spirit, if you will. It's just kind of like a quiet moment for him to kind of sit and you get like you really feel like you're like with him in his head in the way that you kind of always were with Max. Like, it's one of the small little ways I think it captures what I liked about the first one.
Yeah, having a constant companion character in this game means that you don't get that inner monologue that existed in all of the previous Life is Strange games.
Smooth one, Max.
Yeah. And so it does give you that, like, moment of introspection, especially when you get to, like, flip back through the notebook, which I also genuinely liked, and see the characters drawn out and, like, his interpretations of them. It is sort of like a surrogate form of character development, one that doesn't, in my experience, work as well as real character development does. But it's nice that it's there. Like, if the characters were also more fleshed out, I feel like I would have found those drawings even more charming than they were.
Janelle has to sneeze.
Sorry, I suppressed it. It's okay. We're good. We're good. Sorry.
It's interesting that I like the points about introspection, and now that you've said it, I partly agree. I don't. For me, the character or the drawing mechanic was not very successful. It could. I can't really put my finger on exactly what I didn't like about it, but
was it that the referencing was just looking at something for a while, and then the drawing was moving the C stick around in concentric circles?
Yeah, it was from like a mechanical perspective. It was like confusing because at first I thought like, okay, I need to move the stick in a certain way, but really you just have to like move it in any direction. So I would just like hold A to look at it and then swirl it in a circle until it was done drawing, which like wasn't very satisfying to do. And a lot, like, they recycled all of his, like, lines about drawing every time, which felt kind of lazy and weird. Like, now, time to take the pen, dude. I was like, it looks pretty good, but I can add more details if I want. Like, they could have done more, I think. It felt like a little low effort. Well, I was never, like, excited about doing the drawings.
No, Max had her photography that ended up, again, working with the power and like more in the story. And while I liked this, and I liked the aspect of having the journal and it kind of being like a logbook of their time on the road, it ended up feeling like it was a fun character detail for him, but it wasn't tied into the story in the same way. It wasn't as satisfying.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a absence makes the heart grow fonder thing, I think, for me, because I do not remember him saying the exact things every time he opened the book, which is a good point. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, I noted it, but I did not... it didn't stick with me enough that it became something that I thought of in retrospect. It is kind of stupid, given the amount of dialogue that's in this game, that they couldn't have hashed out. Because they're like, what, 10 total drawing segments in the whole game?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, they wrote
they
unique
needed an additional
dialogue for
2
like
minutes of
looking at a
dialogue.
soup can, but they
Yeah.
couldn't write. It's like, let me look at this can. Like, I remember when Dad used to make a soup. How am I going to tell Daniel that Dad won't make a soup anymore?
Yeah.
I was gonna say the first episode to me felt by far the longest out of all of them. And maybe it's because the others were very vignette like of, okay, this is the weed farm episode. Okay, this is the grandparents episode. This is the cult episode. With this one, you're in Seattle, then you're in the forest, and then you're at the roadside place, and then you're in the car with, I can't think of his name. The
Seth
blogger.
Rogen.
Brody.
It is Brody.
And then you're at the motel. Like, you go to all of those places, and I think that would be maybe better if the other arcs were the same way. But I also think that it lost some of the punch of the first episode because it kept kind of dragging. Like, I kept thinking, okay, now's the end of the episode. Okay, now it kind of had a Return of the King issue where there were like 7 different endings.
Oh,
And
it's
I love-
really boring and takes 3 hours.
I love Return of the King. I don't want to talk about that. But it's the most apt comparison, I think, where if you weren't enjoying the experience like I wasn't, I kept thinking like, okay, this makes sense to end. And then it's like, fuck, they're still in the fucking car. Like, I don't want to talk to Brody. I want the episode to be over.
Yeah, they cover the most geographic distance in that game, like in that episode in gameplay, whereas in other ones they kind of like sort of skip by all of the traveling, including meeting some kind of important characters, which is, I don't know, not a great decision. But that does make the first episode feel both the most realized and also the longest. So I agree with that, I think, entirely. It's just more of a... I almost kind of wish that the other episodes followed that formula a little bit closer. Like, I would rather the whole third episode of this game just be removed.
Wait, what's the third one? The weed farm?
That's
Yeah.
the weed farm, yeah.
Okay.
And replaced with them traveling to it and then the events of it being described to me in a notebook. Like, if they did a switch of that where you go and you meet the characters individually, like when they introduced Cassidy and Dumb Guy for the first
Finn.
time.
Oh, you didn't like him either?
Finn.
Good.
Nobody likes Finn.
No.
When they introduced those characters for the first time is when you're at that like yard sale or
The market.
fucking,
The
Yeah.
Christmas market?
yeah, farmers market. And like, I did not interpret them as being important characters when I saw them, and was shocked when the game vacuumed me into a cutscene with them. Like, I was trying to walk totally past them, paying them no attention, and then suddenly I was in dialogue. Like, I was so surprised by that. And like, and because of that, the conversation we had was like, do you think that she was pretty cool? And I was like, I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to her. Like, I just assumed there was nothing there.
One small thing they did in that initial interaction that I really bounced off of was, you guys are probably going to think this is really stupid, but I didn't think it was a cool, chill thing that they didn't put their dog on a leash in a public place. Like,
Yeah.
I've been out in public, I can think of at least once, like down in Florida with my brother, where like a dog was not on a leash and it just went and like tried to kill another dog, and it was horrible. Like, it was honestly like traumatizing. Like, put your dog on a leash. It's not like a cool counterculture thing to say we don't do leashes. Like, you're out in public, like, you have responsibility to put your dog on a leash so it doesn't like hurt anyone, even if it's a cool dog. Like, that's the kind of like
It's
minimum social like courtesy you can do.
Yeah, I think they just wanted it to be shorthand for like, these people are
They're
laid
free.
back. Yeah, they're free.
Yeah, it's the symbolism of the leash that they're going with. But they did it in... Basically, the entirety of that chapter was this problem. There was symbolism of freedom, but done in a way that made the characters seem irritating.
Yeah.
Not in a way that made them seem actually free.
Do we want to backpedal and talk about the second episode?
Yeah, probably.
We should, because it's the best episode in the game, in my opinion.
The one where they're at the
Grandparents' house?
grandparents' house?
The
Stephen
Captain
and Claire.
Spirit
Yeah.
episode?
Yes. So I do like the lead in to that. Like mushrooms, like semi-tragic, semi-sweet chocolate chips, and it was like I liked the living in the cabin and practicing the powers, like the training montage part of it felt like the natural build-up. But honestly, leading into episode 3, I was like pretty sold on this game, and it kind of went downhill after that.
Mm-hmm.
But the second episode I think starts really strong, and I think generally I liked where they were going. I liked the idea of it being them living on their own.
And the second episode gave us something we really needed, which was like that release valve. Like when they get to Stephen and Claire, it's like, okay, like take a breath. Things are like a little more normal now. Like there are adults back in the picture. Like we're living in a house, and I mean that was the most slice of life episode, because you're like that house felt like a real house. I think the way it was designed and like the art direction and the animation stuff was like terrific. It just felt like a house that like people of that age would live in, like in the Pacific Northwest. Like it felt like a real place, and I liked it a lot for that reason. And you just get to have like some more quiet moments of just like doing everyday things, and I thought that for that reason that episode was pretty effective.
I also just kind of want to put a pin in the idea of family and kind of like family ties and obligations. This probably isn't the most compelling place to talk about it, but I think kind of Stephen and Claire and the events of episode 2 do play into it, but it probably makes more sense when Karen comes into play later. I think the most important choices of this episode are, 1, did you tell Stephen the truth about the powers? And 2, did you pull Stephen from the bookshelf breaking his legs, or did you let Daniel use the power?
More importantly, did you do all your chores before you went outside to play?
That actually isn't the last one. The last one that I was going to ask choice-wise. And again, you can answer these in order, with this one being the last and kind of more important, is that I didn't play Captain Spirit, and we did not upload a save with Captain Spirit in it. And so I wondered how that affected your interactions with Chris. Please answer them in order in essay format, please and thanks.
I think this is as good a time as any to say, and I know actually that Andy disagrees with me on this, so this will be an interesting for the audience to interpret how we perceive things. I think that we played this game badly. Like, I think that we did a bad job of doing what was like right and that had the least effect on other people and shit, and like ended up putting us on a good path. Like, I think that we strayed from that pretty far, and I think that episode 2 is where that really begins. And also, just to buffer the third question, we played Captain Spirit, but we did it on a different platform than we played Life is Strange 2. So yeah, we also did not have a save for Captain Spirit in the game when we played this chapter. So I don't know what the difference is. Probably not significant.
Did you know the right answers when you were identifying heroes and villains with his toys?
I think we got 4 out of 5.
Yeah.
We missed one,
We got a
but
lot
I
of
don't
them wrong.
remember which one. But yeah, we did not tell Stephen the truth, but we did pull him from the bookshelf.
We used the powers.
used the
We did not
powers.
break his legs.
Right. Breaking his legs seemed like a bad idea.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
We did tell the truth.
What about Chris? Did you save him with your
Okay.
powers?
So he didn't trust us because we didn't get all the toys right. And like maybe we didn't
okay.
ask the right questions. But we had kind of had the discussion with Daniel throughout of like, don't use your powers recklessly, but if it comes time that you have no other choice and it's to help somebody else, like, use your powers. So we didn't get the best ending where he just, like, helps us escape. We got the one where the car was coming at Chris and Daniel diverted it. So Chris didn't die, which I know is a possibility.
In ours, he got hit by the car, but did not die.
Yeah, he survives it and sends you a letter afterward. Apparently he thought we were chill enough dudes that he did not blame us for him being run over by a car.
Well, he just got hit.
So here's my question.
He only breaks his arm, so...
Yeah.
Here's my question about Chris.
Okay. Do you hate him? Answer
No.
yes.
It's not my question.
I didn't hate
I liked
that
Chris.
one. I hated the other one.
I remember not liking Chris that much in the Captain Spirit game, but I think compared to Daniel, he actually compares pretty favorably.
That's
Yeah,
my
he
question
feels
about
like a
Chris
real kid.
Yeah.
He thinks he has powers, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And when you're running from the cops, this is what happened for us anyway. He steps out in the middle of the road and holds out his hand to use his powers to stop the police car.
Uh-huh.
Did that happen to you guys?
Yes.
Yes.
What does he think he's doing in that moment? Because he doesn't know who you are. And he doesn't know why you're trying to run away from the cops. He also doesn't know that you are running away from the cops. We snuck out the back door. So, from Chris's perspective, he hears a police car and was like, I'm gonna go fucking stop this car. And just, steps out in the middle of the road. It makes no sense. Is he, a psychopath?
He's he just has really strong feelings about the police.
I say
What you don't know is that Chris has ACAB tattooed on his back.
I don't remember the context well enough to know if there's an explanation or not.
Yeah, because, he knows who we are, at least in our playthrough. He was familiar with us as people and did think that he had powers.
Uh-huh. Wait, did it have something to do with his dad? Maybe? I can't remember.
He probably wouldn't go to stop the cops confronting his dad. This is, once again, we're getting into the Captain Spirit podcast, but I feel like it handles the whole abuse thing kind of, poorly. It plays a little bit too much to just be, abuse is just there to make you feel for the kid.
Yeah, I kind of like the way that it always felt like a thing that's nebulously happening away from you, almost like it was framed through the eyes of a kid.
Yeah.
I thought that was actually pretty good.
So
But no, overall,
Was
I don't
he-
think they tied it in well.
Was he abused? I thought, based on again, as someone who did not play Captain Spirit, I viewed it as the dad was depressed and neglectful and didn't know how to take care of his kid.
In Captain Spirit, it's a little bit more... I don't know how to describe it. I will say yes, because abuse can take many forms. He's not
True.
physically abusive, but
True.
he is
Emotionally
he's
abusive.
emotionally abusive.
Yeah.
And
He's pretty
they're,
shitty in Captain Spirit.
Well, see, that's not...
Yeah.
If
Yeah,
you didn't
he-
play the
he'll,
game, I don't think
order
you got that at all from the dad.
from 2. Yeah. Especially with the heartfelt conversation that happens in his truck. If you did play Captain Spirit, it's really hard to empathize in that moment, but it's also hard to roleplay because there's no reason that Sean would be openly antagonistic to this
Yeah,
guy.
because he doesn't have the context.
Yeah, but you as the player kind of do, and are you want to tell him get your shit together,
Right.
and stop being a dick. But also at the same time, if you're trying to put yourself in Sean's position, you're hey man, I'm just trying to get back home.
Right.
Can you unlock the car door? Which is kind of the tact that I took when I was negotiating in that scene, is just being yeah man, it's tough all over. I better get back in there.
Yeah, that's
'cause
what we
didn't
did
do our
too.
chores.
That's what we did too. Because you're the way I felt playing that whole episode was we're in a very precarious situation. We're probably the only Mexican people in this town, and we're still in the same state. Or are they in, what state are they? They were in Seattle and they go to...
Beaver Creek,
So
I
they
think
were they in
Washington.
Oregon or were they still in Washington?
They were in Washington.
Either way, they're in like the same general region. Like people surely have heard about this. They know that you're related to
yeah.
Claire and Steven. So like every choice we made was like, no, like we were like gonna keep our heads as far down as possible. Like
no friends, no attachments.
We're not gonna like get on the internet because we miss Facebook or whatever he says.
Pretty much all of our choices were avoid doing anything illegal at all costs. Like our choice, obviously, we had no fucking control over Daniel and what he did, but Sean did nothing illegal, like, unless it was in reaction to what Daniel did. And he did nothing that would put, like, anyone else at risk. So, like, we didn't contact Lila at any point, because we didn't want her to be culpable if the police got in contact with her.
Yeah, we didn't wake Finn up at the hospital, we just, like, left him.
We didn't take anything from the store in episode 1. We didn't assault.
We didn't take anything
the
from the
redneck
guy either after he was knocked out.
Yeah. So like that was like we were like, let's lay low.
And it didn't really pay off that much.
Nope.
But...
Nope.
No,
Sure didn't.
not at all. I think of those things, the only thing that we strayed from is
we took stuff from the convenience store. We took a tent.
To be fair, the whole time, to be fair to me and to incriminate Andy as much as possible, the whole time we were in the store, Andy was like, "You got to figure out how to steal stuff like in a covert way." And I was like, "Man, I don't know. That woman's right there. I'm not just gonna like." Pocket these Choco Crisps. He's like, dude, just take everything. Just walk out with the whole store.
I liked the idea of the challenge of stealing things from under her nose.
Chaos
Okay?
God.
I kind of really liked that. Like, reflecting on it, I liked that sequence of, like, you have a very small amount of, like, a pretty modest amount of money. And even though if, like, you asked me, I probably would have predicted, like, the game is going to take a left turn in a way that, like, this isn't really that meaningful. But in the moment, like, if you're trying to play it like, okay, this is, like, if this happened to me in real life, it felt like really meaningful choices. Like, you can get some water and, like, some food, or, like, pull all your money and buy, like, the tent, but not buy any food or water. Like, I was really thinking at the time, like, what are we going to need? And, like, are we going to run out of food after a day? So I actually liked, like, the headspace that scene got me in. It felt really authentic.
We played the crane game.
Of course.
You wanted to play the crane game. We're bad people.
You're a psychopath. You have like
we were bad people to
$10,
play the
no
game
food or
together.
water, and you played the crane game.
We missed all of that. I'm sorry.
It was exactly what you'd expect for Daniel ranting at your immaturity.
Yeah, I could actually read his lips there, and I'm usually bad at that, so...
Yeah, no, I just, well, because we, like, decided on some things to get, and we got, like, a really minimal amount of stuff. Our thought process, I think, well, other than steal everything, was if we buy a couple of things, we can either A, steal stuff later, or B, we'll have the money later to, like, use... at a different place where maybe it isn't $4 for macaroni and cheese, and
those local markups.
Yeah,
you gotta go to a national chain.
But yeah, Daniel begged me to play the crane game, and I was like, I don't know, we still got like $10. Like, why not?
I mean, he begged us too, and we said no.
Did you win anything?
No. Tried it 4 times, did not succeed.
You won affection in the heart of your dearest brother.
That's true. Probably not as much affection as if we would have won something.
Yeah,
but...
he probably just resented us more.
Yeah,
because we didn't win him anything.
Oh, did you guys have enough money to buy? Sorry, go ahead, Chad.
I was just gonna say, continuing with the winning sequences from the first 2 episodes, the whole sequence in the convenience store where you have to like break out of the office, I thought was actually good and in the spirit of the original game, where it was like putting you in the situation where you had to like examine the surroundings and figure out what to do.
Yeah,
like
it reminds me of like pushing the big spool to like hit the thing to get Chloe unstuck from the train tracks and stuff like that.
Yeah,
in the first one.
What I was going to ask is, did you guys have enough money to buy Claire and Steven a present or Daniel Christmas presents at the Christmas market? Because that was the only time
Yeah,
we stole. We stole a yo-yo because I was like, we literally didn't have enough money to buy anything.
I don't remember.
We
bought one thing.
that was for Daniel. We didn't buy anything for Claire and Steven.
Yeah, they got their own money.
Yeah. They're like, I mean, let's be honest. Their house is pretty extravagant for being next door to, like,
A shack.
yeah, where Chris lives. So, like, I think they're probably doing pretty well for their tax bracket. And we've got $11.
You should have given them, had the option to give them one of the many pine cones that Daniel had in his backpack. Did you guys check Daniel's backpack throughout? Because it always had, like, only useless, stupid shit in it.
Yep. Hula toy, pine cones. I forget what else he always had with him, but yeah, it was pretty weird.
All right, let's talk about
Choco Crisp
the
wrappers.
episode 3 that you hate so much.
Because listen, if you want to talk about hot takes,
Okay.
the entire time I'm like, Daniel, one, I said something's up with Finn. Not that hot of a take. My hot
Something's
take.
up with Finn. Something's up with Finn.
My prediction is I'm like, this dude is way too close to Daniel. No late teen, early 20s dude should be that close with like a 10-year-old boy. I'm like, this motherfucker is gonna molest our brother and we're gonna have to murder him. So
Now, to be fair,
Wow.
the game had just been escalating darker and darker things up to that point, so I totally
That's
thought
true,
it was
yeah.
capable of doing that.
So when I found out later, after I was like, okay, what are all the possible options? Let me Google that it was like Finn is a possible romance option.
Mm-hmm.
I was like,
Which seems unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
I knew something was going to happen with him that would cause like a betrayal or some kind of drama. Obviously, I'm like, I thought he was trying to basically groom a 10-year-old. I'm not going to be making goo-goo eyes at him.
Yeah, there's like in the way that Life is Strange 1 made it seem to me that the heterosexual romance was like the furthest imaginable thing from something that someone could choose.
Mm-hmm.
This one goes even a step further in making the homosexual romance feel like a entire impossibility. Like, at what point can you get even close enough to Finn that makes any sense?
Well, first of all, I read the process of doing. And then I also read someone's hot take, if you want to talk about hot takes, about how Finn is the canon romance.
Okay.
Listen, I'm just saying, if you want to read it, just Google Finn romance, and someone is like, listen, here is why. Number 1. And like,
I'm not
listing
sure
all the
that
reasons.
this is like a take as much as it is like a weird slash fic that
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable.
I really wanted to like episode 3. Like, it seemed like it was gonna have like a little bit more of like an open, relaxed format. Being in a hippie weed farm commune thing. But I do fall in line with the group and thinking it was kind of weak. But although I was super into the idea of trying to get with Cassidy, no surprises there. So I had fun with that, in the way you do with romance options in games. But like the climax of it was all right. I don't know. I don't have a lot to say about this one.
The climax, my problem...
I actually actively disliked not only Cassie as a character, but Cassidy's romance option. I felt a part of the reason why I was so blindsided by the fact that Finn was an option was because I felt like the Cassidy option was so like forced. Like it didn't feel like I had another option, and the responses that de-escalated the situation felt unnatural, like things that you wouldn't say to a person. So it felt like it was just going to inevitably end up there, with the ultimate choice being, do you go to the lake or don't you go to the lake, being the only one that really made or broke that relationship. I don't know. It didn't land with me. I didn't think Cassidy was cool. I didn't think most of these characters were cool. And I thought that their whole idea of a cool outdoor weed farm thing was kind of ruined by the fact that they were all pretty much conscionably working with somebody who is like the worst kind of like bizarro capitalist warmongering violent man, which made no sense to me in any way. Like the whole thing was just like a farce.
It felt like they wanted him to be Gus from Breaking Bad.
Yes.
Even though that doesn't make any sense in this context.
Also, yes.
Yeah, I mean, just like economically, does it really make sense to hire like 10 people to work that operation? Like, it didn't look that big.
I mean, admittedly, we don't see the full scope of it, and I'm
Yeah,
also
I
not a
guess.
weed economist, but like, it seemed to me like they were probably fine with the like 4 or 5 people they had, but they kept bringing people in as favors. But it just he doesn't seem like the kind of person who does favors for people. He
Right.
has an armed guard around him at all times. Like, the dude's obviously paranoid and like concerned about his like business operations and shit. But like, I don't know, like the whole system that they've set up doesn't make sense to me, and none of the characters really made a whole lot of sense in their motivations either.
Yeah, so I agree with all of that. I didn't like that the driving plot point was like Daniel doesn't want to be treated like a kid anymore, even though he still totally is a kid and isn't responsible enough to make decisions for himself, but he is like gonna lash out and do something like this happens in every story with a kid that's growing up. Like, it's such a common trope at this point that I think you need to do something pretty interesting to make it worthwhile, and this just did like a pretty by the numbers version of it. And I also didn't like that it is frustrating in a game that is at least ostensibly predicated on putting importance on player choice to be able to see something really bad like coming down the road super obviously and not be presented with at least what feels like choices that like respond to that threat. Like, it's not metagaming to be like, okay, Finn very clearly expressed a desire to rob this guy and like now knows about Daniel's power, and all we did was say like, hey, you better knock it off, Finn. And then like there's no option to like go keep an eye on Daniel to make sure he doesn't like get roped into doing this with Finn. Like, that's a totally normal response to that situation that isn't present. And if they wanted to still get to the end point that they got to, I think it could have pretty easily been written a little differently to still get there. As it was, it felt like, all right, like, we know this is going to happen. There's nothing we can do about it. So let's just like wait for it to happen to us. Like, I felt like the story was happening to the characters rather than us being actively involved in making meaningful choices, which is what we're supposed to feel like.
It made the metagaming part of it to lean into the robbery, because given no opportunity to cancel the robbery, you then going forward with it with your whole heart is really the only way to make it end well, which seems counterintuitive.
Yeah,
How'd
I don't
you guys
know.
like pruning weed?
What?
During that whole sequence, I'm like, man, you know who's gonna hate this? Andy. Because all I could think of is when we had to find the like bottles.
No, he loved that. That was his favorite part of the game.
Oh, finding the bottles.
That's not true. I liked that part. It was not my favorite
You
part
have said
of
in
the
the
game.
past it was one of your favorite parts
What,
of the game.
finding the bottles?
Yes.
I thought it
Okay.
was the opposite.
That
No,
was
you
an
were
exaggeration
right. And,
then.
But you did like it. I'm not misrepresenting.
I did like that part, yeah.
It was me who hated the bottles.
Well, and you also hated cutting the weed.
I liked cutting the weed more because, for really totally uninteresting reasons that I'm actually not even going to get into. I liked the cutting the weed more. It was more satisfying because it was just like repetitive motion, which I find somewhat calming.
But I was just gonna say,
What?
Daniel is maybe peak insufferable, which that's
Just full
saying
stop.
something in this episode.
No, I thought you were talking
now,
about me.
on this podcast. Yeah.
I'm okay. I did have this discussion with Daniel because, as someone with a more unique name, anytime anyone is named Janelle in any media, anytime anyone says a word that's kind of like consonantly adjacent to Janelle, like my ears perk up. And so I was like, how does it feel to have like this entire thing like be about a character that has your name? And he's like, oh no, it really doesn't bother me at all. So I'm kind of astonished that this is the first time any of us have made that joke about Daniel.
Yeah, I really did think you were talking about me.
No.
Mostly because you were going to say something negative.
Also, genuinely, I feel like you get desensitized to it. My name doesn't come up a whole lot necessarily, but I do. For a long time, I did like turn my head whenever a child called for their dad. And, like that got so old that I just have to like just ignore it. Yeah. So it doesn't. It's not really a thing for me either. I will say the internet Chad meme is maybe the worst thing that's ever happened to me.
But when I was thinking of names, I was like, man, Chad is the least Chadliest Chad. Like,
it's true.
Yeah. Chads in media are always like douchebags.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but I was just gonna say, as someone who obviously didn't go through quite the same trauma that these brothers did, but did come from kind of like a complex family relationship, the idea of like acting up to the degree that Daniel does was like repellent to me. And I'm like, you don't get a pass because you're a kid. Like, calm the fuck down. Your brother is doing the best he can. Like, let's chill out. But then, of course, when they were like, went in to get their paychecks, and he's like, just stay here, Daniel. I already got warned that if you do anything else, we're gonna get in big trouble. I'm like, great, so we're just gonna fucking leave him out here so he can do something so we can get in big trouble. Like, you know what's coming.
Yeah.
And you end up resenting him because of it, because you can't step in and be like, Daniel, cut the shit.
And it's pretty unbelievable. Like, yes, he's a kid, but like, that dude is clearly bad news. Like, even a kid gets that. And his business partner walks around with an assault rifle. Like, I don't think as a kid I would be like, let me just dick around and like maybe like get caught trespassing in their house because I'm bored.
A kid would want to be as far away from that kind of person as possible.
Yeah. You'd be terrifying.
Yeah. What was your guys' ending to chapter 3?
So we got in the house, confronted Finn and Daniel, and we're like, we fucking told you not to fucking do this. And Daniel's like, I'm grown, I can do what I want.
Yeah,
and like
Daniel
blasts the door open. What's his name? Weed farm owner comes out with a gun and is like, I knew you shitheads were gonna cause problems. Like, pistol whips Finn.
But then we had Daniel use his power to like throw the gun across the room. Then he pulled a pistol out and we like wrestled with him for a while. Daniel got grazed with a bullet and then like freaked out and blew up the room.
Everyone got injured, no one died.
Yeah, nobody died.
That's exactly the same.
Yeah, that's what we got as well.
Apparently, like, yeah, I guess Finn could have gotten shot. I think Cassidy could have gotten killed.
Yeah,
they both could have ended up dying. Finn can die. If Finn dies, Daniel still rages out and blows everything up, but I don't think Cassidy gets injured then. You can save both Cassidy and Finn, but they both end up getting hospitalized. I think that's how that goes. I think.
Yeah. I know from reading the everyone else did this stats at the end of the chapter that like you could have snuck around the back of the building and like avoided a lot of the conflict. So I was wondering if you guys had done that. It didn't seem it seemed like a very hidden option.
Yeah.
No, we didn't do
You
that.
also could have somehow warned Weed Farm owner. WFO.
Yeah. I don't know. Don't know how.
Yeah, I think
Weed Farm owner was like, I knew you guys were going to cause trouble, but this game just disregards the idea of meaningful choice, and I'm forced to be in this situation with this shotgun. So how about everybody just calm down?
All right, should we move on to episode 4?
I think so.
I'm very curious to know how you guys got out of the hospital.
God, I honestly tried so many different things to, like, egress in like a way that made any sense at all, and the only way that I could even begin to think we could leave was by the whole process of like propping the window open and climbing down the scaffolding barefoot like some fucking lunatic.
That's how we left too. That's the only way to leave without hurting anybody.
Or like,
You actually have to hurt the guard that they make a point to say
It's like really cool.
and like sleeps all the time. Like,
well, or the nurse.
Yeah,
Yeah,
did-
you can either talk the nurse into it, putting his job at serious risk, or like trick him into it. Or you can also knock him out, which I'm like, I don't want to knock our nurse friend out. Shit.
Yeah.
Then you steal
But
a
yeah,
car.
do you-
Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah,
No option there.
do you have to steal the car?
I have to assume.
Yeah,
I
I,
think
I don't
so.
think
I
there's
don't think
another
there's a
way.
choice.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, that's like the point where I feel like that's the point of no return. That was the Darth Fartley moment.
Yeah.
Very old callback where I feel like he was like, I mean, we're technically innocent of everything up to this point. Like, no court can convict them in the situation where everything shakes out and, like, it is, like, the truth is told.
I don't
And then
think
he's
the
like,
game
but I'm
thinks
just gonna
that.
No, the game definitely does not think that. But then he steals a car and just drives away and is like, I feel kind of bad about stealing this car. It's like, well,
Yeah, I feel like this is really the point where you realize it's not just... Because, like, I thought at first maybe he was like, oh shit, you know, there's no way the police will believe us because of who we are and the racial tensions right now. And then I thought maybe it would come to a head of, like, if you guys had waited, like, things would have shaken out. Or, like, he would have gotten called up by the police and they would have, you know, like, it would have resolved better. But this is kind of where you realize, like, oh, the game thinks that there are a lot of legal precedents for things that aren't actually true.
Yeah, can we talk about... This might be a good time to talk about the JJ Reviews Justice Systems portion of the podcast.
I'm gonna get some water and recline.
So, like, I don't want to get too into the weeds here because it's not interesting, but, like, just big picture, there are some pretty, like, important flaws in the way that the game thinks about, like, crimes. And it's very confused. Like, I was knocked off my feet when the FBI agent said that he was being charged with, like, first-degree murder. Because I don't, like, what evidence do they have for this? I mean, the police officer is dead, obviously, but, like, nobody saw what happened. Given that we know what happened, we know that none of the evidence at the crime scene is going to suggest, like, a way that he was killed that makes any sense. Like,
right.
Sean's
Blunt force
fingerprints...
trauma to the entire body.
Yeah, what is
Nova-ing.
Of course they're gonna be after the two of them because they were at the scene of what happened, and they might even suspect that they did commit a crime. But, like, what prosecutor would, like, look at that and say, like, okay, we're gonna charge Sean with murder? Like, they don't...
Edgeworth.
They don't... Yeah, maybe Edgeworth.
Yeah, Von Karma.
or Von Karma. But,
because even with the dash cam evidence, what you see is him shoot an unarmed man and then an explosion.
Yeah.
Like, he gets blown out of frame and the car gets blown up and then the feed cuts out. Like, they didn't
if anything,
do
the
anything.
camera supports the view that, like, that they didn't kill him because, like, what would they have done to cause the explosion? So it's very confusing to me. And then later in the game, when they tell him that Daniel is too young to be charged, that's wrong and weird. Like, he would be tried as a minor, but there's no such thing as, like an 8-year-old isn't just too young to be charged with anything. Like, he would be tried in a juvenile court and, like, potentially be part of, like, he could be, like, in essentially a juvenile prison, like a detainment facility for minors who have committed serious offenses. But, like, if they think he killed the police officer, they certainly would, like, put him through some kind of proceeding and try to get him into some kind of juvenile program or detention center. Like, I'm not an expert on that, but like I know that much.
Right.
So, in that completely undercut all of Sean's actions. Like, if he's living in a world where Daniel is too young to get in trouble for anything, and he's just gonna go live with the grandparents, like, what is everything that we have done up to this point been for? Like,
Yeah,
what are we protecting him from?
Yeah, it seems like it's a misguided effort sort of from the beginning. And I don't think that it's by design, but like you expressed the same thing. Like you felt like it seemed weird that they were doing what they were doing.
Yeah, like it feels like it seems like the game thinks the circumstances are a lot more extreme than they are, like to justify what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Like they just keep committing, like they didn't do anything, but now they're committing a bunch more crimes from being on the run, and like actual crimes. It doesn't. There's like a disconnect there. That's just weird.
Yeah. This is maybe less we reviewed the justice system of Life is Strange 2 and more we review the education system that goes into making people aware of what is and is not a crime.
This is like a French developer, so...
That is true. Maybe in France. All of this is accurate.
I mean, it's believable that they would run, for sure.
Yes.
And then, they've run and they feel like they have to keep going now because they've dug themselves into a hole. Like,
but
I
think
that.
Once you're in the hospital, you're with Agent Flores. Agent Flores can be like, why did you run? We just wanted you for questioning. We saw the explosion that happened. Like, was there a gas leak?
But instead, he's already been charged with murder. Like, on the basis of
he's going to
nothing.
Court.
It just doesn't make any sense. That's not like the way that sequence would play out. Also, she doesn't Mirandize him when she questions him, so like none of that.
Oh no!
Like you have to re-Mirandize somebody who is being detained every time you question them, or else like you run a pretty serious risk of anything they say not being admissible. Which I feel like there's an earlier point where they make they do the Mirandizing, so I thought it was weird that they omitted it.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, if you're a prosecutor trying that case, and we know that if in the ending where you surrender, and I don't know which one you guys picked, Sean does go to prison for, 15 years. So, presumably, somehow he wins this trial, or, gets this conviction. But, if you're a prosecutor, you have to prove to the jury beyond a reasonable doubt that, that Sean killed this police officer. And, you have to present them with a narrative of how it happened. And, how do you do that consistent with what the evidence would show? Sean pulled out a grenade and it exploded but left nothing behind. It was very frustrating to me. I wish the game had, done a little bit more to make it believable that Sean could, actually be charged with this.
The prosecutor in the court was like, you must find the defendant guilty. And they were like, why? And he goes, because, like the defendant was at the time of the crime, I'm holding a thermal detonator.
Yeah, I think, what it boils down to for me is, up till this point, after the whole weed farm explosion fallout, it felt like the story could go in a direction where things would be okay for them. But then once you hit this point, where he steals the car, and they're all in on getting to the border, it's gonna have a sad ending.
Yeah.
It really feels like it switches gears from a game where you have choice that will affect the outcome of the ending and being railroaded into a couple of bad endings.
No, this was by far even though we just talked about how little choice affected chapter 3, in this one you had choices and it seems like very few of them mattered. Do you talk to Finn or not? Well, I don't think that really mattered in the end. Did you get in the truck with the truck driver or not?
Which, by the way, did you?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, we did too.
Yeah.
I was surprised when I saw that most people did. Because I just assume, because everyone you meet in that game is either like a fucking raving lunatic racist or a cool hippie, that this guy was going to be like the world's worst truck driver.
Yeah. I feel like they did such a great job with the sunburn texture on his skin that like everyone just feels so bad for him.
Yeah.
Like I want to get him into that air-conditioned truck. Real bad.
I feel like just not enough people have seen the 1974 classic, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and know that you just don't... Hitchhiking just as an institution should be avoided at all costs.
I thought you were going to say duel, and that semi-truck should be avoided at all costs.
No, not there with my beliefs yet. So we spent a lot of time, and I feel like we're going like real long.
Yeah.
So we should probably get to... Because obviously you've done your due diligence vis-a-vis the legal system in Life is Strange 2. But we should move to the actual town. We actually did kind of talk about this, but the whole like religious cult thing, which I don't think parodies of religious cults have been like fully in vogue for like 4 or 5 years at this point. But
in vogue.
yeah, it does exist in this game, and I honestly thought that their portrayal was really effective, even if I didn't feel like it slotted very well into this game.
It felt unexpected in a way that I thought made it more like impactful. Like when you show up in the town and it's revealed that he's like a cult Christ figure. Mm-hmm. You know, like it just, I don't know. I thought that was a cool reveal.
I was just, I don't know. I mean, since you guys mentioned that you like this episode, I've been trying to think a little bit about, like, I want to have a take on it that's not just kind of lukewarm, but I do feel like, I don't disagree with you that, like, in a vacuum, it's kind of interesting. I really struggle with how little it adds to this story. I mean, Daniel was absent for basically all of it. Not that, like, that's something I'd normally complain about, but, like... Yeah. And it's the most literal version of, like, Daniel is at the center of the story for no good reason except that, like, he's special because we say he's special.
Well...
I mean, he's also special because he has magic powers, but...
He does have... That's, like, the whole... Like, if this was an episode of of the Twilight Zone, which I feel like it could be...
It could be, yeah.
They would lead in with, like, this kid was born with weird telekinetic powers, and therefore... And then the whole, like, plot of this episode takes place. And they would probably cut out the boring sifting through the person's belongings sequence, which sucked and just didn't feel like it needed to be there.
One thing we liked was, and it was a little unexpected, Janelle, like, was talking about this before we even got to the point in the story, was it was nice that their mom... she felt like a fairly authentic portrayal of a person, and one with whom I sympathize, because we like that her explanation for... Well, you can go ahead.
Honestly, I didn't think the game was going to have the balls to write her the way that they did. I thought it was going to be a complete backtrack of, I wish I had stayed. I wish I had been your mother. I was on drugs, or I made this mistake. But the fact that she said, I did what my parents expected, I did what society expected, and I realized I wasn't happy, and I realized that some people shouldn't be mothers and raise children and be wives. And I was like, yeah, that's actually right. Like, I fully expected that they would backtrack with her. And I think that her response was meaningful, because I do think, now that they're, like, kind of realized adults, that reaction of, I can step in now and help, makes more sense for a character that didn't want to do the parts of motherhood that, that she has said that she didn't want to. But that this kind of relationship is one that she can have and feels good and right to her. I think, like I said, Karen was actually my favorite character.
She had a real Sarah Connor vibe to her as well.
Yeah. I actually agree with that a lot. I like what they did with her character, and I liked her character. I felt... I don't know how this is going to resonate with you guys, being that you like the character. I think, like, obviously you put her at a higher level than I did in the end. But, like, I found it difficult to justify how often the game really pushed for forgiveness for Karen in a way that I don't know that I felt like Sean would. Like, not like a rational, normal human being, but Sean, the character in the game, has done basically nothing but badmouth his mom all the way up until... I mean, there are moments in Chapter 2 that you can have that argument and, like, say, well, maybe she did it because of you or whatever. But realistically, like, he feels like she left them out in the cold. And the game gives you the options of continue being absolutely distant from her or always edging toward forgiveness. There's no, like, middle ground where you're like, this is like a new relationship, which I feel like is what it should be.
I think...
I feel like we were able to kind of walk a middle ground.
Yeah, I think I approached it from two perspectives here. One being from someone who is estranged from a parent, and one being as a woman who doesn't necessarily want a traditional family life. So I was able to empathize with Karen more personally as someone who's like, yeah, if I felt like I needed to have kids and then realized it sucked, I might take the same kind of route that she did. And also as someone who's always said that they would like a certain amount of explanation and responsibility and understanding from said parent for there to be a relationship, I felt like it hit the requirements from me as the player in Sean's position. Now, I think if you were metagaming it more so as Sean, who's like, fuck you, mom, like, you fucking left us the whole way through, I think that's fine, because I don't think the game necessarily gives you those, again, it's a show don't tell kind of a thing. I was putting my own feelings into the game that the game didn't necessarily supply for Sean. But I think we did walk the middle line. We let her talk in episode 4, but we didn't let her, like, clean our wound. We were like, nah, I got it, Karen. We consistently called her Karen. Yeah. Except for the very end where we gave her a hug. We left her, like, a lukewarm note.
Yeah, the game called it lukewarm. I thought it was nice, but...
But again, I think you think it was nice because it walks that line of where their relationship stands, of, I understand, I don't agree with what you did necessarily, but I understand because of your explanation that you needed your freedom and you had signed up for a life that you later realized wasn't for you. And I appreciate what you've done for us now, and I wish you well. And I think that, for me, felt right. And I think that's why she's a complex character, and I think the relationship is complex, and again, maybe I'm reading more into it from my background, and the fact that it kind of gives you that binary option of fairly warm to mad and cold, without there being a more distinct middle ground is kind of a failing there. So, yeah, I just kind of wanted to know what happened with you guys in the church showdown. Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah, I really did. I felt like when we saw the end screen for this one, I felt like we did really well in the church showdown, and I was surprised, honestly.
Yeah. We got Daniel, and we left with Karen.
Did you kill Elizabeth?
But, like, did the church burn down?
No, both. Well, yes, the church
burned down. We walked away from a fiery church,
but
like
both
a badass.
Elizabeth and that other person who was there.
Yeah, they both lived. Everyone lived. And
okay, that's basically the outcome we got.
Yeah,
then.
Yeah. If you look at, like, the breakdown, a lot of people, like, Daniel can, like, murder Elizabeth, and, like, all kinds of crazy shit can go down.
Yeah, I think we were, as soon as we hit the house, we were like, this is the Kate moment for this game. Mm-hmm. We have to memorize all this stuff. Like, we were ready for it.
Yeah. I think there was, like, one thing that I will argue was poorly telegraphed by the text prompts. But honestly, I'm kind of blanking on what it even
I
was
don't
at this
remember.
point. But there was one thing that I was like, this obviously is a thing that you would say. And he was like, blah, blah, blah. But you like grapes, right? And I was like, what? That isn't at all what it seemed like he was going to say.
Yeah.
So there was like one stumbling block. But for the most part, I think we kind of
What do you think about the showdown in the church as like an emotional inflection point in the way that it was intended to be? For me, it was not especially successful. I thought that it was strained a little bit and maybe too contrived. Like him just getting hit in the face and then saying something about how he's never going to give up and then getting hit in the face again. That felt like it almost verged on comedy, which was not at all what it was supposed to do. And it just didn't. It wasn't very effective for me. I was wondering what you guys thought about it.
Yeah, I feel like I enjoyed Chapter 4 pretty much entirely in a gameplay sense. Like, story-wise, it didn't really like deepen my connection to the characters at all. It didn't really do much for the story. I just like enjoyed finding all the pieces and then being able to use them to get out of the situation in like the good way, air quotes. It was kind of how I engaged with it, which is, not really what you want in this kind of a game, but that was my experience.
I agree with that, honestly. Like I said, I feel like conceptually it works, and I think that it would make a good Twilight Zone episode, but I don't think that it slots particularly well into this game, other than, obviously, the centerpiece having to be Daniel having telekinetic powers. So, I don't know. And also the little girl who was, like, obviously dying was really ham-fisted, and felt like they just wanted to make sure that at no point you went in and went like, maybe they're doing a good thing here.
Well, did you... I felt like there might be some hypocrisy in that, because what was her name? Joanne or Joan? Joan?
Or no, it's Joanne spelled Joan. It's very confusing.
In the next episode, was she coded to you guys as having either cancer or some kind of serious illness?
Yeah, like
yes, because
kind
like
of illness.
On the one hand, the game really goes out of its way to tell you, like, look at these idiot religious fanatics not believing in science and medicine, and yet, like, she's part of the cool, chill community that also lives off the grid without access to modern medicine, and she is like, oh, I'm just I just keep miraculously living every day. Like, I really found that kind of objectionable. Like, if they really went out of their way to make that point, but then when it was a character who, like, otherwise was somebody that we were supposed to like and whose lifestyle we were supposed to approve of, then it's okay to, like, not believe in science.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with that. I don't think that, like... I don't think the game puts enough pressure on the off-the-grid society, like, as a concept. Like, the game just sort of, like, says that it is good, despite, or at least it's sustainable.
It implies it,
yeah. In a way that, like, doesn't interrogate it at all. Like, at no point do they feel like even the people who live in fucking, where is it? Escape
Away.
Heaven. What's
Away.
the name of their... What is it? Away.
I like Escape Heaven.
Escape Heaven.
Escape Heaven, which is my favorite, I don't know.
Album.
Yeah.
By the Wolf Brothers.
Escape Heaven. By
the
the
people
Wolf
who
Brothers.
live there still go to town to get all of their goods and shit. So, like,
we'll have, like, a guy
really
that makes
living
bread.
off the land. Sorry, I was trying to listen.
Well, yeah, it's because they live in the
land.
fucking desert.
Yeah. It all seems so misguided and weird.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And they, like, at one point, someone says, like, oh, every time we go to town, it's so horrible because we have to be around all their bullshit. It's like, well, then why do you go there to get, like, Kraft mac and cheese and shit? Like, it just feels like there is so little, you're right, there's so little interrogation of, like, what their community is even trying to do and like what the upsides and downsides would be. And instead it's just like, we live outside of society and that is good and there are no real drawbacks to it.
The person who says that is David,
Right.
whose presence I feel we need to at least brush on before we talk about the crossing the border.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've already moved from chapter 4 to 5, and I'm forbidding us to return because we've gone for quite some time. But yeah, we do need to address the fact that David is just there.
I liked his inclusion a lot more than the masturbatory, like, glamour shot of Arcadia Bay in the
Agreed
first
that was
episode. I don't know. I kind of landed for me, honestly. Like, it did feel a little forced to put him in there, but, like, what they did with him I thought was actually, like, effective.
Which world state did you load in with for Arcadia Bay?
We sacrificed
We did
Chloe.
too.
Yeah,
Like, what we actually did, yeah.
we wanted to be truthful to ourselves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wasn't as wild about David's cameo. I mean, I didn't hate it, but at the time it just felt like...
I think wild is potentially overselling Andy's opinion
Yeah.
on it. He appreciated it. I don't know if he would say he's wild about it.
I've got my David
Yeah.
t-shirt.
I guess it was
Yeah.
fine. I don't.
mean,
I
of all-
don't really have anything to add to that. It was fine.
Of all the characters, at least he's not as much of a tool bag. So like that's good. Of all the characters that could have a little of redemption as a treat, I think David is a
Yeah, he got like a little...
good one.
It was just a, yeah, he got a little bit of closure.
But I don't really like... I guess the thing I don't like about it is... It would have been more satisfying for me if that character had like a future where he retained like the core part of his personality and just like grew a little bit in a way that he didn't like suck as bad. Which is kind of what happened in the actual first game, depending on how you play it.
Yeah.
Like, I think you can still be a little, like, stodgy and, not politically, but, like, more in the normal sense of conservative in the way he is. And, like, grow to be a better person. And that's more interesting than, like, the way the, like, stuck-up conservative guy redeemed himself in the broader narrative is he became, like, a cool hippie. Like, I don't know. I'm just saying, there's so many fucking cool hippies in this game. Like, we don't need one more.
Yeah. Yeah, now, I don't know. I also appreciate his inclusion. I like the fact that you can listen in on his phone call with Chloe's mom and sort of, like, get an idea of where he's at and shit. It puts another D on the end of sad as, like, you see that he's kind of, like, he's still broken about the whole thing. And, like, obviously they didn't, like, reconcile.
Yeah, he
in
doesn't
any way.
seem happy to be there, but doesn't feel like he can go back either.
Right. It does seem like more sadness for sadness's sake.
The other way, which is if you preloaded the Max and Chloe leave Arcadia Bay together, Arcadia Bay is sacrificed, is probably even sadder because Joyce is dead, and he holds a lot of bitterness.
Oh yeah,
initially against
how is he not
Max
dead?
and Chloe for leaving.
Oh yeah, he got
Yeah,
like
he was
knocked
in, like,
out, didn't he?
The dark room.
But he gets up again. You ain't never gonna keep him down. Weird. I almost kind of want to play it again with that world state to see if anyone acknowledges the two fucking moons thing.
Well,
Because if you do it, if you reset and sacrifice Chloe, it never happened.
Yeah.
But in the other version, it totally would have, and I want to know if the game.
Arcadia
it.
Bay. Oh no, Arcadia Bay would still be there because it's Halloween-ish when you pass through there. I was wondering if it would have been wiped out by then. I don't know.
Not sure.
Yeah, I think this takes place like a couple years after the
Oh
first
yeah.
game.
So
doesn't it?
I mean, you might.
Yeah, so it would
You
just
might
be
like
gone.
it better because there would be no masturbatory shot of Arcadia Bay in episode 1.
That's true. Yeah.
It would be a masturbatory shot of a crater in the ground.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, okay, so let's, much like I wanted to do while playing the game, I currently want to leave away and go move on with my life and times. So we end up...
At the border.
Essentially, yeah. There's really not a whole lot of build up to it. You get in the car and they're like, "Oh, okay, you're here." Which, I mean, I guess you're not that far away, but they don't do a whole lot. There's like one conversation in the car, and then you end up there. This is also something that we've kind of already talked about, but presumably, is it avoidable to have Daniel use his powers to tear open a hole in the wall?
I think there's an ending where they both get across the border.
You mean before they get arrested?
Yeah, I don't think there is, Chad. I think he does.
Okay.
There's no like choices associated with that.
So, yeah, that's forced to happen, which strengthens my prediction that this was the impetus behind the entire design of this game. But yeah, then I don't know, because this is the scene that happens after that. Weirdly, I think is the most impactful one for the plot of the game that happens in episode 5, which is where you get captured and taken in and interrogated, and during the interrogation, you the guy actually does present you with the things that you're being charged with, which is where it becomes real in a sense, and we're ignoring all of the problems that the things that you're being charged with not making any sense, but having you kind of staring down the barrel of a gun here, and also them giving you the option to try and break the handcuffs, but you can't do it, is also a nice touch. Mm-hmm. You're just kind of stuck there. This is probably my favorite part, the last good part of the game for me. I don't know if people agree.
There was nothing about the last episode that I particularly enjoyed.
I was ready for it to be over, honestly. Sadly.
I was so turned off by the cartoon racist militia people that it really took me out. And so did they just treat the player like they're completely brain dead. Because they have Daniel ask all about why you would build a border wall, and then even ask if there's one on the Canadian border. We get it. If you have a half a brain cell, you understand what the game is trying to say. It's always a hard turn off for me when something has a message that is easy to deduce from the context of what it is showing you, but still thinks that you are too dumb and need to be told explicitly about it. It really took me out of it.
And after you've gotten through 5 episodes of the game already, you've put in 12 hours at this point, and if they still think that you haven't picked up on it, it seems a little harsh.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, the unhappy Mexican couple in the jail cell have an actually more realistic take on institutional racism and immigration laws than your meat grinder family play as.
Although unfortunately they mostly serve as yet another vehicle to tell us what the game thinks about certain politics or social
and more so
ideas.
Than that, it's very, very clear at this point in the game that it's why don't you surrender? You should surrender. It's the smartest thing for you and for Daniel. You'll be out of jail soon. You don't want to cross that border. There's no opportunity for you there. Daniel doesn't speak the language. There's no job opportunity. There's violence on the streets. It's okay, I know this is what you want me to do. I get it. You really just decided in half of episode 4 and all of episode 5 to let me know this is what I should be doing.
And now that we know what it is that we should be doing, what did we do?
We went across the border, and Daniel bailed out of the car. It was great.
And we live with Cassidy on the beach in Mexico.
In direct contradiction to what the game told you to do.
No, honestly, we were
we also did the same.
No, we sat there with the controller in hand and just kind of I'm what do you want to do? He's honestly, I don't care. And I'm that's sad. Because at that point, at the end of Life is Strange 1...
Oh, yeah, it was
oh, fuck, oh, no, what, oh, God, what do we do? And we're So basically the decision came down to me saying, they want us to surrender so bad, and at this point, I am so done with this game and like the things that it keeps trying very, very hard to tell me that I'm just going to pretend like I didn't see it. I can't read all of a sudden. Let's go through the fucking wall.
Yeah, I felt pretty strongly about, like, Daniel needs to go to jail because he's gotten through all of this scot-free and he needs to pay for it. And Sean, I want Sean, who lost a fucking eye for his snob brother, to get away. And that's what we went for. And Sean got away to Mexico with Cassidy and lived happily ever after. And Daniel is under house arrest.
We need to talk about this.
Exactly the way it should be.
This is the final legal thing that really made me go, what the fuck is happening in this fiction?
Is Daniel under house arrest? And if so, what? Like, the game tells us he's too young to be charged. So why does it show us him wearing an ankle bracelet later, like during the final sequence?
Because by their logic, he could not have been charged with anything. So that means either A, he did some more criminal shit, which
is strange.
or
Especially because they pan over, like, school bus saved in Miracle. Like, clearly he's, like, being a cool dude.
Or the game is trying to convince us, and I saw this theory online, that he's being monitored so he doesn't go visit Sean, which is not how immigration law works, because he's an American citizen.
Like, yeah, they can't monitor you just because you're related to somebody who is a criminal in another country.
I was thinking maybe he confessed to, like, killing the cop at the beginning.
Yeah, but he's shown in pictures, like, with a car, and, like, he's visiting his mom in Arizona.
Yeah,
So,
the timeline of it makes no sense. And he's visiting his mom within, at most, 6 years after the events of the story. But we're told that she was arrested and confessed to burning down the church with 2 people inside of it. Like, what? Why is she free and, like, visiting with him in Arizona?
Though, to be fair, she might have confessed to lighting the buildings on fire where people weren't in it. The fire in the church was accidental because the candles knocked over. She just lit the outbuildings on fire as a distraction.
That's true.
So it might have been a lesser charge.
What we're told in the story is that she confessed to burning down the church, but it's possible, yeah.
Either way.
Arson is still a pretty serious charge, and you're probably not going to be free to, like, hang out with your son in a couple years.
Yeah. Why is he...
Who is also under house arrest for murder.
I found that to be truly...
baffling.
Totally baffling. I don't understand what the canonical result is there.
Me neither.
Yeah, we watched the other ending, and I didn't like it very much
No,
either.
yeah, Sean, I just feel so bad for Sean. He really got the raw end of the deal. He does get a sweet prison beard, though.
That's true.
That matches his eye patch very nicely. But, no, yeah, that ending, I would have been pissed if we got that ending.
Yeah.
If we would have turned ourselves in and see broken Sean when he gets out of prison, like, crying.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to see that.
Yeah. I will say I did like the scene at the end of Sean driving away, and Daniel, like, does the wolf howl, and, and Sean doesn't return it, because that's what Daniel fucking deserves.
Yep, lone wolf. No more wolf pack for him.
No.
Did you guys find the Wolf Brothers story to be really obnoxious at the start of every episode? I really kind of grew to hate it by the end.
It gave me time to, like, go to the bathroom and, like, get a snack, which I appreciated.
I thought it was fine.
Yeah, I mean, as a recap, it makes a lot more sense if you're playing this as it comes out, because they're
That's
like
true.
literally months between them, and you don't want to like
and
replay the whole
it does
previous
slot
episode.
into his character nicely that he'd be like making a comic book out
Yeah.
of what they're doing. So like I thought it was.
It does
I was
also
cool with
show
it.
that Daniel is a moron, because when he gets the opportunity to like continue the Wolf Brothers story, he reveals that he somehow doesn't understand that it's a metaphor for their own lives, and is just like, oh, and they kill some goblins, and then they make friends with a unicorn.
Well, do we have
Strange thoughts.
Yeah, that one.
I will go first and keep it very short. somehow this hasn't been said yet, actually. Like, this game was gorgeous, like, visually. Like, it looked great. And in the forest,
Yeah.
I was, like, blown away with how beautiful it was.
Yeah, I had a couple notes on it, but it didn't really seem to fit in with the discussion we were having. But like, I like the subtle. Well, they feel subtle. I think if you put it a side by side, it'd be more drastic. But the improvements they made to the visual style from the first game, like the character models are a lot less uncanny, and they all move more naturally. Like it is a nice visual upgrade. I do like the style a whole lot.
But yeah, there are things that I think are well done about this. It is not a, like, poorly made game. I really like this, like, creative team, and I think they took, like, a big swing on this one, and it just didn't really work for me on a lot of different levels. So I would be interested to check out what they do next, but this just didn't really do it for me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a high anxiety sort of time in most of our lives, it we started playing this before our most recent anxiety inducing world panic, but
just keep it general so that it's still topical a week from now.
Yeah. But
we're taking the lessons that the Life is Strange
Yeah.
game did not take.
yeah, I mean, it just kind of compounded a lot of feelings of anxiety and despair and kind of impotence, because you as a character are kind of helpless, not only to the things that are happening around you and to your family and in your country, but also, you know, your brother is this kind of also wild, uncontrollable force. And, you know, I guess it works from a metaphorical perspective. I think thematically there were a lot of things that I understood, I got. It just didn't necessarily work. It wasn't as subtle or as finessed as I would have liked, and it wasn't a joy to play in the way that I have kind of become accustomed to with the Life is Strange franchise, and I didn't enjoy it as much as I had hoped, unfortunately.
Yeah, I echo a lot of those feelings. We compared the two games a lot, and you know, the first one being like one of my favorite games. Like, I don't want to give off the impression that like I hate this one because it's different. I appreciate that they made a lot of effort to do things differently. It just, I think a lot of the things that they changed, they replaced with things that were weaker or didn't work as well, and it just didn't like cohere as nicely as the first one. It didn't feel like as inspired. So yeah, I think this game is good on its own merit, but it's just not, I didn't click with it like I did with the first one. So it felt a little disappointing.
I echo all of these things, obviously. I think this game has its strong suits in I think the writing, which we didn't actually really talk about, is actually sort of like the actual character writing is a little bit better than it was in the first game, as far as like not making it sound like, you know, adults writing 16-year-olds, which was the problem that we had with the first one. Everyone acted more believably, and that's kind of the way that I want to frame the positives in this, because the big picture stuff in this game just doesn't work as well. And we've gone over it a nauseating amount of times at this point, but most of the characters feel very one-dimensional. They're very cartoony, and the overall message seems too lofty for them to actually like really conquer in this form. Like, it just doesn't quite land the way that it should. So the positive aspects of this game really are on the moment to moment, on the less metaphorical side of things, and I don't think that the game quite meets its expectations. I don't know. Wasn't a giant fan. Don't necessarily disrecommend it, but it isn't like there's a lot out there that is better than this at the same thing that this is trying to do. Thank you for listening to No Clip this week.
And next time, we're going to be trying something a little bit different. Chad's going to be sitting on the
We've
bench.
gotten a lot of requests to replace Chad. So...
Yeah, but don't worry, he'll be back. But Daniel, Janelle will be back along with Steven, who was on the Rascal episode for any longtime fans. When the four of us are going to be talking about Divinity Original Sin 2, which is a CRPG, as they're called, in the style of like Baldur's Gate or Neverwinter Nights.
I'm glad that you did this, because I would have called it Divinity 2 Original Sin, which is what I always thought
same
it was.
though, and I actually played the game.
But yeah, so look forward to that. I think I'm gonna call it Faux Clip because you're not gonna be on there, and I think I'm clever.
I'm still going to.
Yeah.
I'm still going to insist on it incrementing the episode number because we're so fucking close to 100.
Yeah, I think it should count as.
it'll be more than just a regular episode.
It's at least an episode and a half.
It'll be even better.
Oh wow. Until that time, you can get a hold of us. All of our contact information is on our website at noclippodcast.com. There you can find links to our YouTube, our Twitter, our Discord, all of our old episodes, including as far back as Life is Strange 1, which came out nearly 4 years ago, or nearly 5 years ago. Shit.
Time flies.
Yeah, long ass time. What do you guys want to do about the subscribe button?
I don't know, something about exploding it.
Yeah, use your powers to smash.
Tell your little brother.
Yeah, it's too easy though.
About the risks of recklessly smashing that like button.
Don't let that like button smash Chris instead.
And scene.
All right.
Yeah.
We just cut out all of what Daniel said.